you got to look at where the capability gaps are and what are you going to do to fill those capability gaps? That's what, people need. How are you going to contribute to the op plan? Don't build something because you think it's cool tech. Deliver capability. Okay. I mean, look, I'm a tech guy. I love tech, but don't get yourself, too fascinated with the shiny bubble.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of DIV Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Robert Miller, co-founder and CEO at Skydweller Aero. Robert, thanks for hooking up with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to having a good discussion with you.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, and what a great technology. I chuckle because when I was at the Air Force Academy in aeronautical engineering, one of our projects was to design an airplane that could stay up on the solar, is what we were using at the time, trying to figure out, because that was like one of our graduation projects. And as we'll talk today, I think you've made it reality. So this is pretty neat. But anyways, let's talk about you for a little bit. How did you get to a point where you got into designing this airplane and co-founding Skydweller Aero?
Well, my background is undergrad at Stanford, went to work in aerospace. I went to a startup. We built the first satellite that flew on the Pegasus air launch booster. Remember dropping that thing from the B-52? The B-52 was older than all the guys that were working on the program. So it was still the water-cooled engines at the time out at Dryden. And we launched that satellite, and we worked on the next one. We worked on the first dual launch of the Pegasus air booster, and space was taking a long time for things to happen at that time, right? The tempo was a lot slower than it is today. I went back to get my PhD at Michigan, and first, right when I went back, we launched that second satellite, and the third stage battery failed on the Pegasus air launch booster. And I remember I was sitting there, and we could hear it turn on. I was on the internet chat at the time, and this was 95, so we were still, it was still chat, right? And I just decided at that point, space was taking too long. It was time to go work on aircraft. And after I got my PhD, I ended up in Southern California working at Northrop. Had a bunch of different jobs at Northrop. Tech director for Fire Scout, manager for VMS and flight controls for special projects. I did all the GNC I led the GNC effort when they were trying to replace the space shuttle. Northrop and Boeing were competing against Lockheed, the prototype for Firebird, a bunch of stuff I can't talk about. And then my last job there was director for Future Unmanned Systems, where they build the B-2 and other exquisite aircraft. Then I went to a small company. We built all the small drones for Lockheed. So we delivered 3,000 Desert Hawks. I was CTO there. We built some special kit for the Intel guys too. We brought in some private equity guys that had about 70% of the Army One station. I was CTO for both those companies, Chandler May, AME Unmanned Air Systems, sold that to Lockheed Unmanned Integrated Systems. And then I was doing consulting, and then I started Perry Labs with my partner, JD Parks, and we were growing that. And then we had an opportunity to spin Skydweller out of that. And JD and I spun Skydweller out of that. And several years later, here I am, trying to bring perpetual flight to the world.
What a journey. Definitely an aerospace juggernaut. You've seen it all. Leading edge of some very cool stuff. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing. What, for those that are unfamiliar, what is Skydweller Aero? You said perpetual flight, but, what are you really doing?
Skydweller is the world's first commercially viable solar-powered unmanned aircraft. So this is an aircraft that has a wingspan greater than a 747. It's 236 feet wingspan and weighs about the same as an F-150. So it's big. But big also means it has real capability. So we're talking about taking the same kind of payload you'd find on a Gray Eagle or an MQ-9 Reaper, something like that we can, is a meaningful addition to the capabilities of the DoD and our allies too as well.
And so you're building this aircraft behind you, I imagine, in your backdrop.
But we're not just building it, we're flying one right now. So we were able to purchase the Solar Impulse 2 aircraft that flew around the world, all the intellectual property. But that was a manned aircraft, pushrod cable, Part 23 aircraft. And so what we've done is we've converted that into a fully unmanned aircraft now. So ripped out all the pushrod and cables, made some mods, full autonomous fly-by-wire system. Think of flying like Global Hawk, pushrod and cables. A keyboard and mouse, you're flying it, and it's all completely fly-by-wire. So, and we have had airworthiness from some European civilian airworthiness authorities, from FAA, from NavAir. So we're really, we're moving toward an operational capability with this. It's got multiple beyond line of sight data links integrated and working, multiple line of sight data links integrated and working. So we know how to, we can fly it from Stennis, Mississippi, Oklahoma City, from DC. We can fly it from there and we can pump the data wherever we want. We could pump it to SOUTHCOM. We could pump it to, out there at Tyndall where we used to be, and some of the other places like that, or, Fort Gordon, any place, you name it, we can pump it there.
Fantastic. So are you, you bought an airplane. What's for you the biggest, the challenge is you had this vision and then you had an airframe. What's I'd say the secret sauce you're bringing to this mission? Because there are a lot of other folks out there chasing a similar objective.
Yeah. Well, I would say a couple things. One, this is not a bunch of guys that just out of Stanford, although some of us have Stanford MIT degrees. It's a seasoned group of aerospace defense professionals who saw an asset that was not being utilized, that we realized we could grab that asset, we can modify it, we can really unlock a huge amount of value in that asset and bring that capability to the warfighter. And what differentiates us is, this isn't our first or second or third time to the rodeo of unmanning an aircraft, okay? And making it, reliable. Like we've worked on things that if they crash, they won the national news, right? And that's the difference. It's bringing that high reliability, cannot fail mission to this program. And I think a lot of people who are working on very large solar powered aircraft, and I don't even think very large. I mean, I can carry a lot of the other solar powered aircraft as payload. Not so that gives you an idea, right? It's like saying a Cessna 172 is the same as a 737. They don't know what they don't know. That's the easiest way to say it. They don't know what they don't know. So, and, we've got scars to demonstrate that we know it.
Yeah. Is this, from a technology standpoint, so did you just inherit the solar and power technology, or is the whole thing new other than the platform?
No, I mean, they did a very good job. Solar Impulse 2 did an incredible job. Okay. But this is a running man's game. Okay. So they had a product. They hold the longest solo flight of any aircraft of any kind. So it flew for 5 days from Japan to Hawaii with a single guy in there. And what happened was when JD and I were starting the Perry Labs, what happened was DARPA came to me and said, "Hey, Robert, we've got this Forster radar we want to fly." Forster was to look through triple canopy and track people walking around. So it's a pattern of life tool. And they said, we'd like your advice. We want to put it on some unmanned helicopters. I'd been the tech director for the Fire Scouts. When the Navy had grounded at Northrop, pulled me off some classified stuff and put me on it. I fixed it and, got it working up on the ship and then went back behind the green door. So they said, "Will this work?" And I said, "Well, it'll work, but you're going to capture pattern of life 15 minutes at a time because Joseph Kony's way out there in the middle of nowhere, right? And you got to fly pretty slow. A helicopter's got to be almost in a virtual hover for this thing to work." And they said, "Well, could you find something that would work?" And so I was looking around, and like when we were, getting Perry Labs started, we were doing consulting, getting bills paid, stuff like that. And I ran into the Solar Impulse guys, and over the next couple of years, I continued discussions with them. And then JD and I got together with some people, we raised some money, and we spun out Skydweller and got it going. So that's really what was the genesis of this, seeing that there was a capability here. It wasn't a true, it was a component of a larger capability that if we could bring some of our know-how to this and fill this out, that we would answer a problem that's been nagging the U.S. military and other militaries around the world for the last 25, 30 years, which is surveillance, persistent, long endurance surveillance. Okay? And how do you maintain a 24/7 CAP, combat air patrol, at distance, right? Because if you look at what we have today in the inventory, there's a reason why we still fly King Airs, U-28s, Javamen, Liberties, when you got an airport close by. If you're within 500 nautical miles, it's probably cheaper to fly manned aircraft, okay? You start getting further out, maybe 1,000, 1,200 nautical miles, but no longer than 1,500, and then it becomes uneconomical even to fly Reapers or Gray Eagles, okay? And some of the newer stuff, they're trying to build some of the smaller stuff. You run the numbers, they don't fly as fast. It's that number's still there. 1,200 between 1,500 nautical miles is the only thing in the inventory that goes out longer that's at least publicly available is the Triton app and Global Hawk. They can do surveillance out at a 24/7 cap at a much longer distance, except those get very expensive, right? So think about this. Think about an aircraft. You launch out of North Island, San Diego, flies all the way to the Spratly Islands, and does surveillance for weeks and then comes back. That's a capability that really is game changing. I mean, look, even Guam is 2,000 nautical miles between Guam and the Spratlys. So all we have right now, if we want to do surveillance out of Guam with the Spratlys, is Triton, and that's pretty pricey. It's huge, massive capability, but it's expensive, right? Like, let's save those low density, high demand assets for when we need them, and use something like Skydweller to do the kind of, I'll call it's more than commodity, but it's the middle part of the ISR, maritime domain awareness demand, servicing that demand. It's not the super high end, what you're going to get with Triton, some other stuff. It's servicing that middle demand market that the defense, the U.S. Navy needs, and other people need. So
you've seen a clear capability demand requirements, if you will, for this. I assume we've got the high altitude balloons that can do some of, I imagine some of this.
Some. And I
space.
You ever seen the flight path, one of those?
It's pretty impressive.
5 years old and used to draw stuff. That's what it looks like. If you want to fly along a border or do some surveillance or something, I mean, if you kind of want to be over, somewhere in the Western Pacific for a while, maybe. But if you want to be at a specific point, if you want to monitor a shipping lane or something like that, you better fly, And if you want to bring other capabilities, right? It's not just surveillance, resilient comms. And the other thing people don't think about as much these days, but we have let that ability atrophy, is electronic warfare. So I am carrying a 200 kilowatt hour battery with me. And you got to think about, I've got an energy magazine of a certain amount. I'm not going to go into the exact numbers here, but it's a significant amount. And imagine wedge tail type power aperture. So hundreds of kilowatts of power into 20 square meter aperture, because this is a hollow aircraft. You could do some really interesting electronic warfare things.
Absolutely. That's great. Is there what was the biggest tech challenge? As you've done this, obviously from just the airframe components of getting that right, fly by wire. You then have the battery storage, which may have some of it coming with it, but then also the unmanned piece, the comm piece, the control piece. Where did you find the biggest challenges that you were able to overcome?
It's just a lot of work to bring a 236-foot wingspan unmanned aircraft to life. This has some unique flying characteristics that we had to really fully understand to get it where we want it to be as far as the autonomous control aspects. So, it's like I said, it's like you got to do all the corner cases. If you're going to fly for 1 million hours, all that weird stuff is going to happen. All the corner cases are going to happen. We've seen that with some of the other stuff we worked on. You'd be surprised, or maybe not, but that takes a lot of work, and just that amount of work is challenging. Okay. Technically, we've also worked a lot on some of the cutting edge weather prediction technologies that are out there. We've integrated those together. We do our own autonomous mission planning through that. Interesting enough, David, I think you probably would understand this being an Air Force F-15 guy. It's interesting. The same math problems, if you're attacking an IADS and you're trying to avoid pop-up enemy radars, it's very similar to when I got a pop-up thunderstorm in the afternoon flying over the Gulf of America, that I have to avoid that. And it's we've utilized some of that same math to attack this problem. And so this is like, is it difficult? Yes. Have we done it before? Yes. Is it exactly the same? No. But this is where the experience comes in. We got a lot in our bag of tricks.
How much of, your AI buzzwords, your all these things, how much are you incorporating, capabilities, machine learning, on the autonomous side, as well as enhanced sensors? Can you talk a little bit about, how you're integrating with those emerging techs, and are you focused on that, or is it really just a couple of use cases you're driving?
So I'll say this, you don't need machine learning, autonomous things to fly planes autonomously. We've been doing that since the BQM-34s were flying over Vietnam in the 60s, right? Autonomously. So do we really need machine learning AI to make things fly autonomously and do autonomous, the BQM-74 was doing 8G barrel rolls 8 feet off the deck for reasons that we're not going to go into here. And they did that before without machine learning. It's difficult math, okay, but those are techniques. Where machine learning, I think, has some very interesting things going after these less well-defined math problems, like the weather prediction and stuff. There's so much uncertainty. The models are a little bit chaos. So if you can use machine learning to attack those types of problems, which we are, we're using some of that to do that. That's an effective place to really leverage that new technology. Okay. But to do machine learning, formation flight, there's a lot of well-defined, advanced control theory, graph theory. The math tools are there to attack that. Machine learning is great when you don't really understand the physics behind the problem. But if you got the physics, you got math tools to attack that stuff. So on the sensor side, we're integrating the sensors. Okay, so we're not just doing like we've got Maven on board our aircraft and it's doing whatever it's doing, and we're pumping that data down to the ground, up to a CDS, onto SIPR, into some stuff for the Navy. But that Maven's already attacking that. I got to spend my resources bringing that operational capability to life, so to speak. Let Maven, keep the main thing Stephen Covey says, right?
That's right. Maniacal focus on your mission.
Yes.
So you have one airframe?
One airframe right now, and two more we're starting construction on.
And since you didn't build this one, how's that journey?
It's interesting. We've, here's the thing. We've got all the tech data to do it. Okay. They're finding all the suppliers. I mean, this stuff was really custom built in a lot of ways. So moving to full production, we've upgraded some parts, and changed some stuff out to make it more producible. Okay. The composites in this are really fine. They're very, very high end. The solar cells, what's on there now is old tech. We're upgrading those considerably. The batteries have been upgraded considerably already. The motors, electric motor technology has advanced a lot in the last 5-6 years. We're going to get a step up there. So the next two aircrafts are going to be a step up in performance.
Yeah, I think what a great opportunity to just leverage that technology. Well,
yeah,
but it'll look generally the same. You're just,
Yeah, it'll be generally the same. I mean, aircraft look the way they do for a reason, right? I mean, a 737 looks a lot like an A320, right? And those guys, it's...
Damn it, I'm looking for a round disc to fly around and be called a UFO. Can you do that for me?
Well, no, but I am gonna carry a thing to zap the bad guys with from this thing. Think about that, right?
We can finally put that to rest and verify that there are UFOs out there.
Yeah.
Blown by, well, who knows what. So have you gotten to a point with the customer base? Well, who are your primary customers right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing work with SOUTHCOM. There's a lot of interest down there. I mean, the sweet spot for us 24/7, 365 days a year is, Taiwan Strait south. So think Miami to Rio, wrap that around the world, and that's us 365 days a year. Then other parts of the year, 9-10 months of the year, you got a lot more operating capability. You even go to the Arctic for 4 months of the year. I mean, you got perpetual sunlight for 3 or 4 months up there, and then you got darkness, right? So,
right.
It's the right tool for the right job. I'm not replacing everybody, but there's some things I do really, really well, better than anybody else, and that's what we're focusing on. The Air Force just doesn't have F-15s, right? They got C-130, C-17s, you got, E-5s, you got all kinds of stuff, right? So different, you got to have the right tool for the right job. So
that's why I don't understand why we bought F-16s. Just kidding, my F-16 braves, my brothers. That is important, definitely.
Yeah.
And so is your goal then to get this into more of a program of record so that you can create a fleet of these?
Yes, we're working to develop the military utility case so a resource sponsor would pick it up. Okay. And we're working with we're working with the services to identify those capability gaps that need to be filled and how we fill those gaps. Right. I mean, that's how the process works. It's sometimes painfully slow, but there's some reason behind it. I really wish it would go faster. I mean, there's obviously some acquisition reforms. We could go down that rabbit hole and, beat our head against the wall. Or you can jump in and try to make it, work work both. Okay. And, I have my own opinions about how we could reform some of the acquisition, but, until then, I'm going to work the system as best I can. And that means finding those capability gaps, supplying the data, supplying the flight test data, do operational missions that show that we fill that capability gap. So the resource sponsors write the right requirements. So then the acquisition community picks it up and turns it into a program of record and palm lines it.
So from a funding perspective, how did you start this? Was it bootstrap? Did you, raise capital right away? What did that look like? And then have you taken advantage of, the big buzzword right now for fundraising is the SIBR, the grants, or I'd say the contracts, phase 1, phase 2, TAC-5.
Yeah, I mean, we've got multiple phase 1, phase 2s, but, SIBRs don't bring a 236-foot wingspan aircraft to life. So we've had to go out and raise a very significant amount of capital. I mean, if you look at this aircraft, if you think about what Solar Impulse did over 14 years and what we've done over the last 5, you've got $250 million of private investment in this capability. And that is something the U.S. military needs to leverage up. And we've gotten some support, I would say, but it pales in insignificance compared to the $250 million that private money is spent on this, both European and U.S. money too. So
yeah, I mean, you came from also the world of Northrop's and the big primes, and just I'd say generally their machine is, we're not going to do it unless they pay us to do it. And that's why I love private, especially some of the other startups, the Anduril Palantirs, but you get the private capital, prove the capability set, and then they come in. It'd be better if they pay you, but I think this is a way to bring capability to our government.
At some point, if you want innovation, okay, you're going to have to pay for it, okay? So, and I think we are very, very close to being over that line, and once we get there, my expectation is the military is gonna pick this up and run with it. And we've got contracts with some European militaries too as well. We're under contract in the UK as a sub to one of our partners, Leonardo. We're got contract with the French Ministry of Defense, with the Spanish, with the government of Luxembourg. A lot of interest from people like the Australians.
So what are they contracting? Are they contracting you for like, I need this capability over this area right now, go do it? Like, are you operationally delivering? Or is this more, I want to contract you to build this capability so I have the option to purchase?
The Europeans function a little bit differently, okay? Luxembourg we're doing some R&D and composites with Luxembourg, and that's through our Spanish subsidiary. The French, through our Spanish subsidiary, they want us to do a demonstration, okay? And we got to work some data sharing, export stuff to handle that. The Spanish want us to operate in the second half of this year and early into 26 out of the Canary Islands, which is very similar to our SOUTHCOM customer, right? All the kind of nefarious activity, drugs, human trafficking, Canaries is one of the entry points into the EU. And it's basically southern Florida latitude. Right. So when I talk about Miami to Rio, wrap that around the world, you're going to hit the Canaries. So there's a big need there, just like there's a big need in SOUTHCOM and, how we could help in Indo-PACOM, AFRICOM, even CENTCOM, NORTHCOM, EU, or EUROCOM, when you talk about the Arctic in the summertime. So that, we've got interest, and it varies from more operational to kind of R&D-ish. It's all across the board. So same thing in the U.S. We've got R&D stuff. We got operational stuff. So
you are being paid right now to deliver capability to customers.
We're under contract for ISAR for COCO, basically. Go out and fly, power by the hour. We're getting paid power by the hour.
Awesome. Well, talk to me then a little bit, there's obviously challenges with what you're doing. This, weather, I think, is one that's interesting that folks may not think of. There are contested environments, multi-domain operations. You've got, the EW space that's, for you guys would be very important as well. You'd hate to lose control of that bird. How are you looking at those challenges and, evolving, capabilities in your, roadmap, if you will?
Well, I will say this. First of all, if we lose comms, we're not coming down. We're just gonna fly our mission and return home and land. Okay. So from an EW perspective, we're very robust. Okay. I'm talking about delivery non-kinetic effects, important non-kinetic effects. Survivability, I won't go into all that, but I'll say we are a lot more survivable than people realize. It's sometimes I'd rather be lucky than good. It just so happens a lot of these clean tech technologies make you more robust than people realize. And you just got to look at the kill chain and how people are going to come after you and stuff like that. Okay. So,
And altitude does matter. You're pretty high up there, or you can be.
yeah, but come on, man. The altitude doesn't do that much for you. Anybody who tells you flying high is going to make you safer doesn't know the kill chain, right? I mean, look, they popped the Global Hawk at 65,000 feet, right? I mean, come on. It's like they shot down the U-2 at over 70, right? That was back in the late 50s. Come on, man. I mean,
yeah, it's different than flying in the teens or the low 20s doing, unmanned.
Yeah, I mean, but what's going to pop you there too? What's going to come after you? You're going to get, somebody's going to shoot a man pad at you. Got to have a hot spot or something to lock on.
Oh yeah, it's detection issues. I mean, that's
Got to have a hot spot. Tell me where my hot spot is. Okay. So, and they got to hear you. I mean, they hear the Preds and, the Reapers and stuff, you're not going to hear us.
What speed do you fly at? I mean, it's obviously not super fast.
It's 25 knots sea level. That's public.
Oh, wow.
It's slow. So you got to worry about winds. So you don't want to fly in the jet stream with 35, 40 degrees north either way. The roaring 40s are the roaring 40s. So yeah, we don't solve every problem, but I can do a lot of interesting things, plus or minus 25, 30 degrees latitude around the world, and high north too for a good chunk of part of the year.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
I mean, if you want to cover South China Sea, you want to cover that, Philippine Sea, all those areas, those are all great places. Northern part of Australia, Yemen, Somalia, tri-border region, north part of Burkina Faso, Venezuela, Colombia, out where all the nefarious activity in the Eastern Pacific. You go around the world, it just so happens a lot of the bad stuff happens plus or minus 25 degrees latitude around the world.
That is interesting. I haven't thought about that, but you're right.
I mean, let's say you got to look at where the capability gaps are, and what are you going to do to fill those capability gaps? How are you going to contribute to the op plan? Don't build something because you think it's cool tech. Deliver capability. Okay. I mean, look, I'm a tech guy. I love tech, but don't get yourself too fascinated with the shiny bauble.
Yeah, capability, effects.
How do you deliver effects?
Well, that's a struggle, right? The DoD is going with. Do we buy platforms or we buy capability, and what's the best way to deliver that capability?
You can't really, disentangle that incompletely. If anybody who
not completely
disentangle that, I mean, and you got to be careful. I mean, don't try to be everything for everybody. I think we learned that with the F-35, right? I mean, it's like, I'm sorry, but if you do everything for everybody, you don't do any of it super well.
Yeah, well, they took F4, another good example, old school. F-35 is doing with that now. But to your, in driving, trying to get acquisition, we have been notorious, the DoD, purchasing platforms instead of capability.
Yeah.
Even though, again, they do go together, but there is definitely pieces there.
And anybody who tells you they buy on total life cycle cost and not acquisition cost is full of it too.
It's a great bumper sticker. Don't shoot it down too fast.
I only wish they would. We'd be killing it. They bought on total life cycle cost. The maintenance on this thing is going to be crazy. Instead of think of all the maintenance hours per flight hour you put on, Air Force planes right now. We're going to be flight hours per maintenance hour. Much close, it's going to be like commercial, man.
Oh, the electric part of that and the power generation, fly-by-wire. Yeah, a lot of the standard maintenance items appear to go away very quickly.
Not just appear, they do.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about what is the cost per flight hour if you bring in total cost?
I would say you're looking from a logistics and maintenance. Okay, so let's decouple some stuff here too, right? Because operationally comes into three parts. You got operational guys, the AVO, the payload operator, the PET stuff, okay, which is more driven by doctrine than tech. Then you got logistics and maintenance. Logistics and maintenance, you're talking about things that you're heading toward like a 172, 152 cost per flight hour on this thing, maybe lower.
Wow.
Then on the other side here, it's driven by doctrine. Do you need 2 guys in there, or do you need, if I got 5 of these things, 10 of these things out over the Western Pacific, Do I really need 10 guys, one on every aircraft when most of the time they're just watching the paint dry? No. If you had 3 guys managing 10, that's well within, you're not going to have something go wrong on more than 2 of them at any one time, right? So then you got one-on-one. It's like when you worked on stuff like we worked on stuff when I was back at North with my team and stuff where like depending on if you're an aircraft and you're flying back and forth, from a carrier to someplace, you're watching the paint dry. When you get in the stack over a carrier, it's one-on-one, right? You got to do that. Okay. Same thing with the Air Force. If you're transiting from, launch to, the area of interest, okay, you're watching the paint dry. Once you get in the area of interest and you're chasing bad guys, you're doing other stuff, it varies from maybe 2 or 3 aircraft per guy down to 1 aircraft per guy. It just depends on what he's doing, what the operator's doing at that point in time, right? And they need to change. That's one thing. The doctrine needs to change. I mean, I worked on, like I said before, I delivered 3,000 Desert Hawks and some, a lot of small UAVs and stuff, Like we knew these capabilities that are going on in the Ukraine existed back in 2000 2000, okay? But it was doctrine that said, oh, if we're going to go blow up somebody, you've got to have positive ID chain and you got to have 5 lawyers in the room, right? Well, when the Ukrainians got their back against the wall, the Russians are coming over the hill. You don't really care if you got 5 lawyers. You're going to launch whatever you got to stop them, right? So the doctrine changes and you're like, weapons free, guys, go into town, launch everything we got because they're coming over the hill. And if collateral damage is, a nice to, if we can not have it, that's nice to have. But if we have collateral damage, and we stop the Russians, well, we stop the Russians, right? Mm-hmm. Did we really care about collateral damage when we firebombed Dresden? We were, it was time to go to war, guys. And, this wasn't like blowing up guys in mud huts. It's like existential threat. So you do what you need to do.
Yeah, you're right. To design something that can operate in a 0 collateral damage, significantly more expensive than what they're doing in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's what do you
a cardboard box, some aluminum, put some wings on it, go.
And guess what? If the fuse works, 90% of the time, and you launch enough of them, you get the effect you want. Okay. And yeah, you may have some unexploded munitions out there that in the long run are going to be a disaster, and they will be. Okay. I mean, that area is going to have unexploded munitions all over the place for the next 50 years. Right. I mean, it's like, but hell, I mean, when I worked at Los Alamos for a little bit when I was working on the first satellites, there's still places where they lost the maps of the mines around Los Alamos from World War II. You don't go into certain canyons, I mean, when you're at war and you do things, and there's an existential threat, doctrine changes. Okay. You do what you need to do to win.
Absolutely.
I mean, and we got to realize we're not fighting guys in mud huts anymore. We're going to have near peer or peer competition. Like you talk about flying high, that's not going to do you any good. I mean, they're going to pop you. Okay. Up high, the farther away they can see you.
Have you been pulled in at all for, you listen to the latest congressional testimony about protecting the homeland and visibility? Like, I mean, we're not seeing stuff just because we're, the way we've built our defenses. Do you see yourself in a role at all with that?
I think there's a huge role for us on the southern border, okay, which 30 degrees north, okay, all the way down to, Puerto Rico. We can do a lot of stuff. I mean, SOUTHCOM, we can set up a huge picket line and catch the bad guys, nefarious activity. There's a lot of things that we could contribute to that fight. And there's even on the Iron Dome stuff, there's certain things we could do, certain missions we could do that I'm not going to go into here that I think that could support that, especially on collecting data, things like that. So.
Yeah, no, I think that you have, obviously quite a journey as an entrepreneur, an aerospace savant. What lessons have you learned starting a company, an aerospace company, well, a couple of them, navigating the challenges of just a startup as well as working with the government and private investment? Like if you had to give a couple tidbits to our listeners who might be interested in that.
The hardest thing I do is raising money and trying to explain the DoD, the opaque business of dealing business with the DoD and intel agencies. It's difficult for people to understand how the system works. Raising money and getting enough to get the job done before the government picks you up. That's by far the hardest thing. It's always, you're always out trying to feed the beast, because you listen to some Silicon Valley guys who like, let's do a demo and get them all shaken up and then they'll fund us. The DoD can see through that. You got more intelligent buyers than you do sometimes in the commercial space, and it's, I've had some interesting conversations with some investors. So that's about all I'll say on that topic.
I can believe it. That fundraising is a pain in the ass. It sucks.
Understatement.
But it is a necessary evil for sure.
It's a necessary evil. You got to get it done and you got to feed the beast. So,
well, we're going to start wrapping this up. I have 2 questions, kind of finish up. What key milestones or goals? You mentioned you're building a couple more platforms. Like, where do you see yourself in the next few years? 2 years, then 7 years, some number of, that kind of shows the roadmap of what are you going to do with Skydweller?
Get these aircraft in the air, get these new aircraft in the air, move toward more of an operational footing, okay, where we have several aircraft out doing ISR services, okay, demonstrating that we're filling capabilities gaps with those ISR services, so the resource sponsors step in, write the requirements, so we get PLOM, so we move into the PLOM, we get in a program of record, go into large scale, production to deliver on the PLOM, and once you do that, you're going to have international sales. You're going to have more COCO too as well, because the acquisition people aren't going to be able to buy enough to service all the COCOM requirements for whatever missions you're doing. So I really see in 2 years really having the resource sponsor requirements. That's my main goal, and having enough aircraft out there doing operational missions that generating revenue, cash flow positive, resource sponsor requirements, moving into the PLOM and full scale, really large scale productions. Okay. Not when I say large scale, like, meaningful, very large scale production. And then, 7 years from now, there's a fleet of these things. We're going to turn the sky dark with perpetual flight aircraft.
What's your paint job going to be? You got to come up with something cool.
Oh,
I recommend this black and orange right here. Black and orange.
We're not going to be seen from the ground. That's the point. Air Force grade, man. You don't want to be seen from the ground.
That is true.
Survivability, right? Survivability. So,
absolutely.
I'm not flying too high because that's not going to help.
That depends what threat you're going against. You're not going to get hit by a manpad up high.
But you also there's IR missiles that'll come at you from other places up there too, and there's radar. So, but think of power aperture when they shoot a radar missile at you, okay? Yeah. Or maybe I'll have a laser on there,
That's what I'm waiting for.
It's coming.
That's a long fuselage. You can do some cool stuff with that.
Yes, you can really do some very interesting things. So,
well, thanks so much, Robert. This has been fun. Love what you're doing. I think it's hugely interesting and important for our country to get this type of capability out to the warfighters. So learned a lot. If folks want to follow what you're doing, how would they best do that?
Look for us on LinkedIn, X, True Social, Instagram, the rest of that stuff. Go to, you're going to see us in the news. I was on Fox News. Go to Forbes. Go to other places. Go to your podcast. Hopefully I've been get invited back. Okay. I haven't, burned any bridges here.
Oh no, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Look for us in the sky.
I say I want to ride, but I guess that's not going to happen, is it?
Nah, that's not going to happen. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And until next time, we will do this again, Robert, but really appreciate your time.
No problem. Great talking to you.